You know that moment when your entire world shatters in a single second? When everything you believe to be true turns out to be a carefully constructed lie? I do. Because it happened to me on a Tuesday afternoon in a church parking lot. Of all places. A church. I was supposed to be picking up decorations for my mother-in-law's surprise birthday party. Instead, I discovered that my husband of 7 years was living a completely different life. And the worst part, everyone knew. Everyone except me. My name is Claire, and this is the story of how a blown tire revealed the most devastating betrayal of my life, and how I made sure that every single person who participated in that lie paid the price. This isn't just a story about catching a cheating husband. Oh no, this goes so much deeper than that. This is about manipulation, deception, and a web of lies so intricate that when I finally pulled the thread, the entire thing came crashing down in the most spectacular way possible. But before I tell you what happened that day, before I take you through the moment that changed everything, I need you to do something for me. Smash that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Because trust me, you're going to want to follow this story all the way to the end. And when I tell you how I got my revenge, you're going to understand why your support means everything. So there I was, driving my silver Honda Civic down Maple Street, the same route I'd driven 100 times before. It was 2:30 in the afternoon. I remember because I'd just left the school where I work as a guidance counselor. I'd taken the afternoon off, told them I had a family emergency to prepare for. The irony of that now makes me sick. The only emergency was the one I was about to walk into. The weather was perfect. Blue skies, sunshine, that crisp autumn air that makes everything feel hopeful. I was humming along to some song on the radio, thinking about whether we should go with the blue or gold decorations for the party. My husband David had been so sweet about the whole thing, helping me plan this surprise for his mother. He'd even suggested the church hall as the venue because, he said, his mom loved that place. She volunteered there every week. That should have been my first clue, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I was about 2 blocks from St. Catherine's Church when I heard it. That sound. If you've ever had a tire blow out, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's not just a pop. It's this violent, explosive bang that makes your heart jump into your throat. The car lurched to the right, and for a second I thought I was going to lose control completely. But I managed to grip the steering wheel, my knuckles white, and guided the car to the side of the road. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. I sat there for a moment, just breathing, trying to calm down. Then I grabbed my phone to call David. That's what you do, right? When something goes wrong, you call your husband, your partner, the person who promised to be there for you through everything. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried again, voicemail. I stared at the phone, confused. David always answered. Always. He worked from home as a software consultant, and he was practically glued to his phone during work hours. But okay, maybe he was on another call. Maybe he was in a meeting. I sent him a text. Tire blew out near St. Catherine's. Need help. Call me. Then I called AAA. The woman on the phone was pleasant, efficient, told me someone would be there within 45 minutes. 45 minutes. I looked down the street and realized I was so close to the church. I could literally see the parking lot from where I was sitting. And that's when I made the decision that changed everything. I decided to walk to the church and wait there. Maybe I could even get started on checking out the hall, seeing where we'd set up the tables, the decorations, make use of the time. I grabbed my purse, locked the car, and started walking in my work heels down the sidewalk. Each click of my shoes on the pavement was like a countdown. Click, 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 walking toward the truth, walking toward the end of everything I knew. The church parking lot was fuller than I expected for a Tuesday afternoon. There were maybe 15 or 20 cars scattered around. I remember thinking it was probably some kind of community meeting or volunteer thing. St. Catherine's was always hosting something. I walked across the parking lot toward the side entrance where I knew the hall was located. And that's when I saw the car. A black Mercedes, the same model as my husband's, same color, same license plate frame from the dealership where we'd bought it 2 years ago. I stopped walking, just froze right there in the middle of the parking lot. My brain tried to make sense of it, tried to come up with a reasonable explanation. Maybe David had come to help with something. Maybe he was surprising me by checking out the venue himself. maybe. Then I saw him, my husband, David, walking out of the church's main entrance, and he wasn't alone. He was wearing a tuxedo, a full, formal tuxedo with a white boutonniere on his lapel. His hair was styled, not the messy work-from-home look he'd had that morning when I kissed him goodbye. He was smiling. That smile I fell in love with 9 years ago. That smile I saw across the breakfast table every morning. That smile that made me feel safe and loved and chosen. Except he wasn't smiling at me. He was smiling at her. The woman next to him was wearing a wedding dress. A full, elaborate, beautiful white wedding dress with lace and beading that caught the afternoon sunlight. Her arm was linked through his. They were holding hands, and they were laughing, surrounded by people. People in formal attire. People throwing something I couldn't even process what. Rose petals maybe, or rice. I couldn't breathe, literally could not make my lungs work. I stood there, behind a van in the parking lot, watching my husband walk out of a church with another woman in a wedding dress, holding her hand, looking at her the way he was supposed to look at me. This wasn't an affair. This wasn't a mistake, a moment of weakness, a one-time thing. This was a wedding, a full ceremony, with guests and formal wear and all the things that take months to plan, while he was married to me. While I was at home being his wife, planning his mother's birthday party, living what I thought was our life together. Let me take you back, because you need to understand who I was before that moment in the parking lot. You need to know what my life looked like, what I believed, so you can understand just how complete this betrayal was. I met David 9 years ago at a coffee shop. I know. It sounds like every romantic comedy ever made, but it really happened that way. I was in my last year of graduate school, buried in textbooks and stress, and I'd claimed a corner table at this little cafe near campus. David came in, looked around for a seat, and asked if he could share my table. The place was packed. He was charming, funny, kind. We talked for 3 hours that day, and I never even opened my textbook. He was working as a junior developer at a tech company, passionate about his work but not obsessed with it. He asked about my studies, actually listened to my answers, remembered details. When I mentioned I was stressed about a presentation, he offered to be my practice audience. A complete stranger, offering to help. We went on our first date 3 days later. Dinner at an Italian restaurant where the waiter spilled wine on the table, and we laughed instead of getting upset. We talked about everything. Our families, our dreams, our fears. He told me about growing up in a small town in Ohio, how his mother raised him and his sister alone after his father left, how he'd worked 2 jobs to put himself through college, how family was everything to him and he couldn't wait to have his own someday. I told him about my parents, both teachers, who'd instilled in me this deep need to help people, how I'd chosen counseling because I wanted to make a difference in kids' lives, especially the ones who felt lost or alone. He looked at me with such respect, such admiration. He said I was exactly the kind of person the world needed more of. 6 months later, he proposed, right there in the same coffee shop where we met. He'd arranged with the owner to close early, set up candles and flowers, and when I walked in thinking we were just grabbing our usual drinks, there he was on one knee with tears in his eyes, asking me to be his forever. Of course I said yes. How could I not? He was everything I'd ever wanted. Stable, loving, supportive. He encouraged my career, never made me feel like I had to choose between my work and our relationship. When I got the job as a school counselor, he planned this whole celebration dinner, invited my parents, told everyone how proud he was of me. The wedding was simple but beautiful. We didn't have much money, so we kept it small. Just close family and friends in a garden venue, handmade decorations, a playlist instead of a DJ. But it was perfect. It was us. David cried when he saw me walking down the aisle. He held my hands during the vows and his voice broke when he promised to love and cherish me for the rest of his life. For better or worse, in sickness and in health, forsaking all others. Those words meant something to me, everything actually. We bought a small house in a quiet neighborhood, 3 bedrooms because we were planning for the future, for the family we'd have someday. We adopted a golden retriever named Murphy who became our baby before the real Bobbies came. We had Sunday morning pancake traditions and Friday movie nights and inside jokes that made us laugh until our stomachs hurt. David's career took off. He went freelance, started making really good money as a consultant. We talked about me maybe cutting back on work when we had kids, but he always said it was my choice, that he'd support whatever I wanted to do. He was proud of his work-from-home setup, showed me his home office like it was a trophy, said it was perfect because he got to be near me, even when he was working. I trusted him completely. I never checked his phone, never questioned where he was, never had that suspicious paranoia some of my friends talked about. Why would I? He was David. My David. The man who brought me coffee in bed on Saturday mornings, who left sticky notes with little hearts on my bathroom mirror, who held me when I had hard days at work and told me how much good I was doing. His mother, Patricia, lived about an hour away. She was this sweet, gentle woman who welcomed me into the family like I was her own daughter. We'd drive to visit her once or twice a month, have dinner, help her with things around her house. She had this way of looking at David with such pure love, such pride in the man he'd become. And she'd tell me how grateful she was that he'd found someone like me. His sister, Amanda, was more distant. She lived on the West Coast, and we only saw her maybe once a year at holidays. But when we did talk, she was friendly enough. She and David were close, always texting, always on phone calls that he'd take in another room because, he said, she liked privacy when she vented about her life. I had no reason to doubt any of it, no reason to question anything. Our life wasn't perfect, but whose is? We had the normal stuff. Disagreements about money sometimes, stress from work, but nothing major, nothing that made me think something was wrong. About 6 months ago, David started traveling more for work, or at least that's what he told me. Client meetings in other cities, conferences, on-site consultations. He'd be gone for a night, sometimes two. He always called me before bed, texted me throughout the day, sent me pictures of boring hotel rooms and conference centers. He complained about the travel, said he missed me and Murphy, couldn't wait to be home. And I believed him, every word, every text, every I love you. 3 weeks ago, he mentioned that his mother's birthday was coming up, said she'd been feeling a bit lonely lately, and maybe we should do something special for her. A surprise party. Really show her how much she meant to us, to the family. He said Amanda might even fly in for it if we could make it work. I jumped on the idea immediately. I loved Patricia, and the thought of organizing something that would make her happy filled me with purpose. David and I spent evenings planning it together, sitting on the couch with notebooks and laptops, coordinating dates and guest lists. He suggested St. Catherine's Church Hall because his mom volunteered there and would feel comfortable. He said he'd handle reaching out to her friends from the church, and I could manage our side of the family and the decorations. We were a team, working together on this beautiful gesture for his mother, or at least that's what I thought we were doing. That's what he made me think. The night before the tire blew out, we'd stayed up late finalizing details. David had been on his laptop, typing away, and I asked him what he was working on. He said he was emailing the church coordinator to confirm the hall rental. I kissed the top of his head, told him he was the best son, and went to get ready for bed. When I came back, he was smiling at his phone. I asked what was funny, and he quickly locked the screen, said it was just a meme from a friend. Then he pulled me onto his lap, kissed me, told me how much he appreciated everything I was doing for his mom, how lucky he was to have me, how much he loved me. I fell asleep in his arms that night, feeling grateful, feeling blessed, feeling like I had exactly the life I'd always wanted. Less than 24 hours later, I'd learned that every single moment had been a lie. I don't know how long I stood there in that parking lot, hidden behind the van, watching the impossible scene in front of me. Time felt strange, like it had stopped and was racing forward all at once. My mind was trying to process what my eyes were seeing, but nothing made sense. Nothing computed. The woman in the wedding dress was young, younger than me, maybe mid-20s with long dark hair styled in an elegant updo. She was beautiful in that fresh, radiant way that brides are supposed to be on their wedding day. She was glowing, happy, laughing as David guided her down the church steps, his hand protectively on her waist. The guests around them were cheering, taking photos, celebrating. I recognized some of them. That realization hit me like a physical blow. David's coworker, James, who'd been to our house for dinner. Our neighbor, Margaret, who waved to us every morning. And there, standing right next to the bride, wearing a lavender dress and holding a bouquet, was David's sister, Amanda. Amanda, who supposedly lived on the West Coast. Amanda, who I thought barely had time to visit. She was the maid of honor, standing there, beaming, hugging this woman in a wedding dress, hugging the woman who was holding my husband's hand. And then I saw Patricia, David's mother, the woman I'd spent weeks planning a surprise birthday party for. She was there in a formal navy dress, wearing a corsage, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. She was crying happy tears, proud mother tears. She hugged David, then hugged the bride, her face full of joy. There was no birthday party. There never was. This was what David had been planning. This is why he needed the church hall, why he'd been coordinating with people, why he'd been so specific about the date and time. He'd used me, used my planning, used my love for his mother to cover up the fact that he was marrying someone else. While being married to me, while living in our house, while sleeping in our bed, while telling me he loved me every single day. I felt like I was going to throw up. My vision tunneled, and I had to grab onto the van to keep from falling. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. There had to be some explanation. Some rational reason why my husband was walking out of a church in a tuxedo with a bride on his arm. But even as my brain scrambled for alternatives, I knew the truth. Deep in my gut, in that place where your body knows things before your mind catches up, I knew exactly what this was. David was living a double life, and I was the fool who never saw it. A photographer was directing the group, organizing them for pictures on the church steps. David stood in the center with his arm around the bride, both of them smiling like they were the happiest people on earth. His mother on one side, his sister on the other. Friends and family gathered around. A perfect wedding portrait. Of someone else's wedding, someone else's family, someone else's life. I watched as they took picture after picture. The bride kissed David's cheek. He twirled her around, her dress spinning out like something from a fairy tale. Everyone laughed and applauded. This wasn't a small, secret thing. This was a full ceremony with dozens of witnesses. People who were in on it, people who knew. My phone buzzed in my hand, making me jump. I looked down at the screen, a text from David. "Sorry, babe, stuck in a meeting. How's the tire? Did AAA come yet?" I stared at those words, read them 3 times. He was texting me, right now, while standing there in a tuxedo with another woman in a wedding dress, while living this complete fiction. He was maintaining the lie, keeping up the act, making sure I didn't suspect anything. The audacity of it, the calculated cruelty. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was methodical, planned, deliberate. My hands were shaking so hard, I almost dropped the phone. Part of me wanted to run out there, to scream, to destroy that perfect picture with the truth of what he'd done, to make a scene so big that everyone would know what kind of monster he really was. But something stopped me. Maybe it was shock, maybe it was self-preservation, or maybe it was something smarter, something deeper. Some instinct that told me if I played this right, if I stayed calm and thought this through, I could do something bigger than just make a scene. I could destroy him the way he'd destroyed me, but better, smarter, more completely. So instead of running out there, I did something else. I lifted my phone, made sure the sound was off, and I started taking pictures. Video too, every angle I could get from my position. David and the bride, the guests, his mother crying happy tears, his sister adjusting the bride's veil, the photographer directing poses, the church sign in the background clearly showing St. Catherine's. I documented everything. My hands were shaking, tears were streaming down my face, but I kept my phone steady and I recorded every single second of my husband's wedding to another woman. The bride's name, I'd later learn, was Melissa. She worked as a dental hygienist. She'd met David 2 years ago at a professional conference. He'd told her he was single, never mentioned a wife, and they'd started dating long distance. He'd visit her on his business trips, and eventually he'd moved her to an apartment across town. The apartment he'd been paying for with money I thought was going into our savings. He'd proposed to her 6 months ago, around the same time he'd proposed to me 9 years earlier. Same romantic story, same promises, same lies. She had no idea I existed, just like I had no idea she existed. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. Standing there in that parking lot, watching this nightmare unfold, I didn't know those details yet. All I knew was that my husband was a stranger. My marriage was a fraud, and my entire life had been built on lies. The wedding party started moving toward the parking lot, probably heading to a reception somewhere. I ducked down behind the van, my heart pounding so loud I was sure someone would hear it. They walked right past me, laughing and chatting. I heard the bride say something about being the happiest day of her life. I heard David's voice, that familiar voice I'd loved for 9 years, agreeing with her. I waited until they drove away. A line of cars with ribbons and just married signs. My husband's Mercedes leading the procession. Then I stood up on shaking legs, walked back to my car where it sat on the side of the road with its blown tire, and I sat in the driver's seat. And finally, I let myself break. I sobbed, screamed, hit the steering wheel until my hands hurt. I cried until there was nothing left, until I was empty and hollow and numb. The AAA truck showed up 20 minutes later. The driver, a kind older man, changed my tire and asked if I was okay. I told him I'd just gotten some bad news. He patted my shoulder and said whatever it was, time would help. Things always got better. I didn't have the heart to tell him he was wrong. Some things don't get better. Some betrayals are so complete, so devastating, that they fundamentally change who you are. But he was right about one thing. Time would help. Not to heal, but to plan, to strategize, to figure out exactly how to make every single person who participated in this lie pay for what they'd done. I drove home in a daze, my mind spinning. David wouldn't be back until late, that's what his text said. Probably at his reception, dancing with his new bride, celebrating his new life. I had hours, maybe the whole night. And I was going to use every single second. When I walked into our house that afternoon, everything looked exactly the same. Murphy greeted me at the door, tail wagging, happy to see me like always. The kitchen smelled like the coffee David had made that morning. His jacket was still draped over the back of the chair where he'd left it. The book I'd been reading was on the coffee table. Our wedding photo hung on the wall, smiling faces frozen in a moment that apparently meant nothing. Everything was the same, except nothing would ever be the same again. I stood in the entryway, looking at this life we'd built, and I felt like I was in a stranger's home. Every object, every piece of furniture, every shared memory was now tainted with the knowledge of what he'd done, what he was still doing. The thought made my stomach turn. Murphy nudged my hand with his nose, sensing something was wrong. I knelt down and buried my face in his fur, the only genuine, honest thing in this house. He didn't lie. He didn't pretend. He was just a dog who loved me unconditionally. I wished humans could be that simple. But I couldn't fall apart. Not yet. I had work to do. I started in David's home office, the place he'd been so proud of, his sanctuary where he made all that money consulting, where he took private calls from his sister, where he'd been typing emails the night before about church coordinators, except now I knew he wasn't emailing about a birthday party. He was finalizing details for his wedding, his second wedding, while being married to me. His laptop was closed on his desk. I opened it, and of course it required a password. I tried the obvious ones, our anniversary, my birthday, Murphy's name. Nothing worked. Then I tried his mother's birthday. The screen unlocked. The irony wasn't lost on me. His mother, the woman I'd been planning a party for, was the password to his secret life. I started going through his emails. My hands were still shaking, and part of me didn't want to know what I'd find. But the stronger part, the part that was already planning and calculating, needed to know everything. Every detail, every lie. The first email I found was from someone named Melissa Grant. The subject line was, "Can't wait to be Mrs. Cooper," my married name. He was giving her my name. I clicked it open. "David, I still can't believe it's finally happening. Tomorrow I become your wife. These last 2 years have been like a dream. I know the long distance has been hard, and I know your work keeps you traveling so much, but after tomorrow, we start our real life together. I can't wait to wake up next to you every morning. I love you so much. Forever yours, Melissa. 2 years, he'd been with her for 2 years. I sat back in the chair, trying to breathe. 2 years of lies, of double lives, of him coming home to me after being with her, of him telling us both he loved us, of him planning a future with her while living a present with me. I kept reading. There were hundreds of emails between them, love notes, plans. He'd told her he traveled for work constantly, which is why he couldn't always be available. He'd created this whole narrative where he was a dedicated professional who was building a life for their future. She believed every word. She had no idea about me, just like I'd had no idea about her. I found emails from wedding planners, venue coordinators, the church. Father Michael at St. Catherine's had sent a lovely note about being honored to officiate their ceremony. The same Father Michael who I'd met twice at church events, who'd shaken my hand and blessed our marriage when I mentioned I was David's wife. He knew. He had to have known. There were emails from David's mother, Patricia, talking about how excited she was for the wedding, how much she loved Melissa, how she'd always wanted David to find someone special. There was an email thread where Patricia and Melissa discussed dress shopping, flowers, making plans like any future mother and daughter-in-law would. Not a single mention of me. In Patricia's emails to her son about his upcoming wedding, I didn't exist. The woman I'd been planning a birthday party for had watched her son plan a wedding to another woman while he was married to me, and she'd participated, encouraged it, celebrated it. I found financial records next. Bank statements for accounts I didn't know existed. David had been funneling money into separate accounts for years. He'd rented an apartment across town, like I later confirmed. Paid for it monthly. $1,500 a month for a place I never knew existed. A place where he lived his other life. He'd bought Melissa a ring. I found the receipt. 3 months ago, he'd spent $8,000 on an engagement ring. I looked down at my own hand, at the modest ring he'd given me 9 years ago. The one he said was all he could afford but was given with all his heart. That ring suddenly felt like a joke, a placeholder for the real thing he'd given someone else. There were credit card statements showing purchases I'd never seen. Dinners at romantic restaurants, hotel rooms, gifts, flowers delivered to an address I didn't recognize. He'd been courting her, romancing her, while coming home to me and watching TV on the couch like we were some old married couple past the romance stage. We were married. We were an old married couple, except he'd been living like a newlywed with someone else. I found text messages next, synced to his laptop. Thousands of them between David and Melissa. Sweet good morning messages. I miss yous and can't wait to see yous. Intimate messages that made me feel sick. Messages sent while he was sitting next to me, while we were having dinner, while we were supposedly spending quality time together. There were also group chats, one with David, Amanda, and Patricia. They coordinated the wedding in detail, who would sit where, what food to serve. Patricia worried about her dress fitting right. Amanda sent pictures of bridesmaid dress options. They discussed me exactly once in 3 months of planning. Amanda had written, "What about C? Is she going to be a problem?" David's response, "No, I've got it handled. She thinks she's planning Mom's birthday party. By the time she figures anything out, it'll be done." My name reduced to a single letter, a problem to be managed, something he had handled. I found myself laughing, this horrible, bitter sound that scared Murphy. He whined and left the room, and I didn't blame him. I didn't recognize myself either. The worst part, the thing that made me want to set the whole house on fire, was finding the emails about his plans after the wedding. David had been preparing to leave me. He'd consulted with a lawyer, asked about divorce procedures, specifically how to protect his assets. He wanted to know if there was a way to file that would minimize what I'd get in the settlement. He was going to marry Melissa, wait a few weeks to make it look legitimate, then come home and ask me for a divorce. He'd already drafted the conversation in notes on his computer. I found the file labeled Talk with C. It outlined how he'd tell me he'd been unhappy for a while, that he'd met someone else. that he wanted to be honest with me and end things amicably. He'd offer me a settlement, less than I'd be entitled to, but he'd frame it as being generous. He'd noted that I was too nice and conflict-averse to fight him on it, that I'd probably just want it over with quickly. He'd strategized our divorce based on my personality, based on his assessment that I was weak, too kind, too trusting. He wasn't wrong about who I'd been, but he'd just created someone very different. I spent 4 hours going through that computer. I copied everything. Every email, every text, every photo, every document. I created a folder on a cloud drive he didn't have access to and backed up every shred of evidence. Bank statements, receipts, messages, photos from social media accounts I didn't know he had. Photos of him and Melissa at restaurants, on trips, living this whole relationship publicly in spaces where no one from our real life would see. Then I went through our bedroom, our closet. I found a second phone hidden in a shoebox on his side, a phone I'd never seen him use. When I turned it on, it had a different wallpaper, a photo of him and Melissa. His contact list was full of names I didn't recognize. This was his other life phone, the one he used when he was being that version of David. I found receipts in his jacket pockets, clothes I'd never seen him wear, probably kept at the apartment. I found a wedding band, new, engraved on the inside with David and Melissa forever. He was planning to wear that ring, to replace the one that matched mine. By the time I finished searching, it was almost 10 at night. David texted me around 8 saying his meeting was running late. He'd probably just grabbed dinner out, not to wait up. I knew what he was really doing. He was at his wedding reception, dancing with his bride, celebrating with his family and friends, living his best life while I sat in our house, surrounded by evidence of his betrayal. I couldn't eat, couldn't think straight, but I could plan. I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and I started writing everything down. What I knew, what I had proof of, what I needed to find out, who knew about this and participated, who needed to pay. Because this wasn't just about David anymore. This was about his mother, who'd welcomed me into her family while helping plan her son's wedding to another woman. This was about his sister, who'd pretended to be my friend while being that woman's maid of honor. This was about the friends and neighbors who attended that wedding, who watched him commit what was essentially bigamy and said nothing. This was about Melissa, who might be innocent in some ways but was still wearing my name and sleeping with my husband. She needed to know the truth. She deserved that much. And David needed to lose everything. Not just me, not just his comfortable double life. Everything. His reputation, his relationships, his money, his future. He'd systematically dismantled my entire existence, and I was going to return the favor with interest. I heard his car pull into the driveway around 11. I'd had hours to prepare, to decide how to play this. Part of me wanted to confront him immediately, to throw the evidence in his face and watch him scramble for excuses. But that would give him time to react, to cover his tracks, to spin some story. No, I needed to be smarter than that. I needed to let him think everything was fine while I put all my pieces in place. The confrontation would come, but on my terms, when I was ready, when I could do the maximum damage. So when David walked in the door, I was on the couch in my pajamas, watching TV like it was any normal night. He smiled when he saw me, actually smiled, kissed the top of my head. "Hey, baby, sorry I'm so late. That meeting was brutal. How was your day? Did they fix the tire okay?" I looked up at him, this man I'd loved for 9 years, this stranger who just married another woman and was now standing in our living room pretending to be my devoted husband. And I smiled back. "Yeah, all fixed. No big deal. How was your meeting?" "Exhausting," he said, loosening his tie. The same tie he'd probably been wearing under his tuxedo jacket hours ago. "I'm beat. Mind if I just head to bed?" "Of course not. I'll be up in a bit." He kissed me again, told me he loved me, and walked upstairs to our bedroom. To our bed, where he'd sleep next to me like he hadn't just committed himself to another woman in front of God and everyone. I sat there listening to him get ready for bed, and I felt nothing. The hurt was still there, buried deep, but on the surface I was calm, focused. I had work to do, and emotions would only get in the way. That night, lying next to him in the dark, listening to him breathe, I started refining my plan. And let me tell you, it was going to be beautiful. The next morning, I woke up before David and went for a run. I needed to clear my head, needed to think. Murphy came with me, happy for the early exercise. We ran through the neighborhood, past houses where families were waking up, starting their normal days. I wondered how many of them were living lies, how many perfect facades were hiding rot underneath. When I got back, David was in the kitchen making coffee. He'd made me a cup too, just how I liked it. He was humming in a good mood. Of course he was. He'd just gotten married. Again. "Morning, gorgeous," he said, handing me the mug. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," I said, not a lie. "Everything okay?" He looked concerned. The loving husband act was flawless. "Yeah, just restless. Excited about your mom's party, I guess. It's coming up so soon." I watched his face carefully. He didn't even flinch, just smiled and nodded. "She's going to love it. You've done such an amazing job planning everything." The audacity. I wanted to throw the hot coffee in his face. Instead, I smiled. "I hope so. I really want it to be special for her." We had breakfast together, chatted about nothing important, and then he went to his office to work. I waited until I heard him on a video call, his voice muffled through the door, and then I made my first call. To a divorce lawyer, but not just any divorce lawyer. I'd spent half the night researching, reading reviews, looking for someone with a reputation for being aggressive and thorough. I found Margaret Chen, a lawyer whose website promised to fight for every penny her clients deserved. Her reviews were full of grateful women who'd been underestimated by their husbands and walked away with everything. Perfect. I called from my car, parked down the street from our house. When Margaret answered, I gave her the abbreviated version of my situation. She was quiet for a moment after I finished. Then she said 3 words that made me smile for the first time since the parking lot. "Destroy him legally." We set up a meeting for that afternoon. I told work I needed a few personal days, family emergency. My supervisor, who'd known me for 5 years and never seen me take unscheduled time off, immediately approved it and told me to take care of myself. If only she knew. At Margaret's office, I laid out everything. Showed her the photos and videos from the church, the emails, the bank statements, the evidence of the secret apartment, the hidden accounts, the second phone. She went through it all with sharp, calculating eyes. "This is bigamy," she said. "He married another woman while still married to you. That's a crime in this state. We can have him arrested if you want to go that route." "I want to consider all my options," I said. "What would hurt him most?" Margaret leaned back in her chair, a slight smile on her face. "I like you. Most women come in here heartbroken and wanting it over quickly. You want strategy." He thought I'd be too nice to fight. He wrote that down. I found it in his notes. Her smile widened. "Then let's prove him spectacularly wrong. Here's what we're going to do." For the next 2 hours, we planned. Margaret explained that because David had hidden assets and committed fraud, we could go after everything. The house would be mine, no question. The retirement accounts he'd been building, his business assets. And because he'd been funneling marital money to support his affair and second life, I was entitled to compensation for that. But more than that, the bigamy meant his second marriage wasn't legal. It was void, which meant Melissa wasn't actually his wife, no matter what that ceremony looked like. When she found out, if she wanted to, she could come after him too. For fraud, emotional distress, all of it. "Do you want me to contact her?" Margaret asked. I thought about it. Melissa was a victim too, in a way. She didn't know about me. She'd been lied to just as thoroughly. But she'd also been the other woman, knowingly or not. She'd been living in that apartment, accepting his gifts, planning a future with someone else's husband. "Not yet," I said. "I want to talk to her myself, but I need more information first." Margaret nodded. "I can have an investigator pull together a full report, where she works, her background, everything. Give you the full picture before you approach her." "Do it." We signed the retainer agreement. Margaret warned me that this kind of divorce, especially with criminal elements, could get ugly. David would fight back. He'd hire his own lawyers, try to protect his assets, maybe even try to spin it so he looked like the victim somehow. I told her I didn't care. I wanted ugly. I wanted him to know exactly what it felt like to have your world destroyed. The investigators' report came back 2 days later. Melissa Grant, 26 years old, worked as a dental hygienist at a practice downtown. She'd grown up in a small town upstate, moved to the city for work 5 years ago. No criminal record, no red flags. By all accounts, she was a normal woman who'd fallen in love with the wrong man. She'd been living in the apartment David rented for almost a year. Before that, she'd lived an hour away, which explained the long-distance story he'd told her. He'd convinced her to move closer about 6 months after they met, said he wanted to see her more, helped her find the apartment. She probably thought he was being generous. She had no idea he was literally paying for it with money from our joint accounts. The report included her work schedule, her social media profiles, everything. I looked at her photos online. She seemed sweet, happy. Her posts were about her job, her cat, her excitement about the wedding. She'd posted pictures of her ring, close-ups of the venue, a countdown to the big day. In every photo with David, he was tagged as David Cooper, my last name, our last name. She'd posted photos from the wedding, too. The two of them on the church steps, surrounded by family. Her and Amanda, arms around each other, best friends. Her and Patricia, holding hands. The captions were full of joy and love and gratitude. Married to my best friend, the happiest day of my life, so blessed. I felt a twist of something, not quite sympathy, but close. She really had no idea. She thought she'd married a single man who loved her. She was living a dream, and I was about to turn it into a nightmare. But she deserved to know the truth, just like I deserved to know. I found her work address and decided to pay her a visit. Margaret advised against it, said it could complicate things legally. But I didn't care. This wasn't about the law, this was personal. On Thursday morning, I drove to the dental practice where Melissa worked. It was in a nice part of town, professional building, clean and modern. I waited in my car outside, watching the entrance. Around noon, she came out for lunch, still in her scrubs, talking on her phone. She looked happy, glowing, even newlywed glow. I felt sick. I got out of my car and walked toward her. She was still on the phone, laughing at something. As I got closer, I could hear her conversation. I know, Mom, it still doesn't feel real. Mrs. Cooper, I keep looking at my ring and just, yes, he's amazing, I'm so lucky. Mrs. Cooper, my name. My identity. She'd taken it unknowingly, but she'd taken it nonetheless. I was 5 feet away when she noticed me. She smiled politely, the way you do at strangers, and moved slightly to let me pass. But I didn't pass. I stopped right in front of her. Melissa Grant, I said. Her smile faltered a little, confused. Yes, can I help you? My name is Claire Cooper, I said, watching her face carefully. I'm David's wife. The color drained from her face. The phone slipped from her hand, clattered on the sidewalk. She stared at me, mouth open, unable to form words. Around us, people kept walking, living their normal lives, completely unaware that this woman's world was imploding. What? She finally whispered. No, that's not. You're lying. I've been married to David for 7 years, I said, keeping my voice calm even though my heart was pounding. We have a house together, a dog, a life, and 4 days ago I watched him marry you while still married to me. Tears were already streaming down her face. She shook her head, backing away from me like I was dangerous. Maybe I was. No, David wouldn't. He said he was single. He loves me. We just got married. You're crazy. You're some crazy person trying to. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos. My wedding photos with David. Pictures of us in our house. Recent photos from just weeks ago. Then I showed her the photos I'd taken in the parking lot. David in his tuxedo with her while I was still his legal wife. She looked at the screen and something in her broke. She collapsed onto a nearby bench, sobbing, her whole body shaking. People started to stare. I sat down next to her. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. I know this isn't what you want to hear, but you deserve to know the truth. He lied to both of us. 7 years, she choked out between sobs. You've been married for 7 years. Yes. The trips, his work. He said he traveled for work. That's why he couldn't always stay over. That's why. She looked at me with devastated eyes. He was with you. He was going home to you. Yes. She pressed her hands to her face, trying to control her crying. His family, his mother, his sister, they were at the wedding. They knew you existed. That was what I'd wanted to confirm. Yes, they all knew about me, and they helped him do this to both of us. Melissa looked like she might be sick. Patricia, she helped me plan everything. She called me her daughter. She knew. She knew. We sat there in silence for a moment, two women who'd both loved the same man, both been betrayed by him and everyone around him. Finally, Melissa looked at me. What are you going to do? I'm divorcing him, I said, and I'm making sure he pays for everything he's done. The question is, what are you going to do? She wiped her eyes, and I saw something shift in her expression. The devastation was still there, but underneath it, anger was building. The marriage isn't legal, is it, if he was already married to you? No, it's void. You're not actually married to him. She laughed this broken sound. I quit my job last week. I put in my notice because we were going to move to a bigger place, start our life together. He said he was ready to settle down, stop traveling so much. I gave up my apartment, most of my furniture. Everything is in boxes at his place. His place that he's been renting while living in our house with me, I said. She stood up suddenly, her face hard. I want to help you. Whatever you're planning to do to him, I want in. He doesn't get to do this to us, to anyone. I stood too, looking at this woman who was supposed to be my enemy but was really just another victim. Are you sure? It's going to get messy. Good, she said fiercely. He deserves messy. What do we do? And that's how Melissa and I became unlikely allies in taking down the man we'd both loved. Over the next week, Melissa and I met 3 times. She told me everything about her relationship with David, filling in the gaps of his double life. I told her everything I'd found, showed her all the evidence. We compared stories, timelines, lies. The picture that emerged was of a man who'd been living 2 completely separate existences with surgical precision. He'd told Melissa he was a consultant who traveled constantly for work, which explained why he couldn't always be available. He'd told her he owned a condo downtown, but was looking to upgrade once they got married. The apartment he'd rented for her was supposed to be temporary, just until they found the perfect place together. He'd introduced her to his mother and sister about a year into their relationship, told her his family meant everything to him, and he wanted them to love her as much as he did. Patricia had welcomed Melissa warmly, and Amanda had flown in specifically to meet her. They'd had dinners, gone shopping, built relationships. Real relationships, or at least that's what Melissa thought. At no point did anyone mention me. When Melissa asked about David's past relationships, he'd told her he'd dated casually but never found the right person until her. His family backed up this story. Patricia even showed Melissa photos of David growing up, talked about how she'd always hoped he'd find someone special. The narrative was consistent, coordinated, complete. I met some of his friends, Melissa said during one of our meetings. People who came to the wedding. They all treated me like I was the only woman in David's life. Were they all lying too? I thought about the faces I'd recognized in that parking lot. Some of them probably didn't know about me. He's kept his 2 lives very separate. Different friend groups, different places, but some of them knew. Our neighbor was there. People who have been to our house. Melissa looked horrified. How does someone even do this? How do you maintain 2 entire relationships, 2 entire lives without getting caught? Very carefully, I said, and by choosing victims who trust easily. That hit both of us hard. We'd both trusted him completely, never questioned him, never suspected. We were exactly the kind of people someone like David could manipulate. But not anymore. Melissa provided crucial information. She had access to the apartment, which meant access to whatever David kept there. She found more evidence of his double life. Clothes, documents, another laptop. She copied everything, just like I had. Between the 2 of us, we had an airtight case documenting every aspect of his fraud. Margaret, my lawyer, was thrilled. "This is the most documented case of marital fraud I've seen in 20 years, she said. "He's going to lose everything, and there's nothing his lawyers can do to stop it." But it wasn't enough. Not for me. I didn't just want to win in court. I wanted everyone who'd helped him to face consequences. I wanted his mother to lose the son she'd enabled. I wanted his sister to face what she'd participated in. I wanted his friends who'd known to be exposed. I wanted the truth to burn through all of their lives, the way it had burned through mine. Melissa was on board. She was angrier than I was, actually. She'd given up her job, her apartment, her independence for a future that was based on lies. She'd posted about the wedding on social media, told everyone she knew, celebrated publicly. The humiliation of having to explain that it wasn't real, that her husband was actually someone else's husband, was eating her alive. "I want to confront him," she said. "I want to see his face when he realizes we both know." "Not yet," I said. "We need to get everything in place first. Legal protections, financial freezes, everything. If we confront him too early, he'll have time to hide assets, create stories, turn people against us." "So what's the plan?" I smiled. "We're going to throw him a party." Melissa looked confused. "A party?" "A surprise party," I clarified. "For his mother's birthday. The one I've been planning for weeks. The one he used as cover for your wedding. We're actually going to throw it." Understanding dawned on her face. "And invite everyone." "Everyone," I confirmed. "Everyone from both lives. You, me, his family, his friends from both sides. We're going to bring his two worlds together in one room. And then we're going to tell them all exactly who David Cooper really is." It was risky. It was theatrical. It was probably going to be the most uncomfortable event of everyone's lives. But the idea of David walking into a room and seeing both of his lives colliding, seeing Melissa and me standing together, seeing every lie exposed simultaneously in front of everyone he knew, that was worth any risk. "I'm in," Melissa said. "When?" "Next Saturday, the original date I'd planned for the party. I'll tell David everything is set. You'll come as a guest, and we'll coordinate who else to invite." "What about Patricia and Amanda? They're going to realize something's wrong if I'm there." "Let them," I said. "Let them sweat. Let them wonder what's happening. They've been lying for him for 2 years. They can be uncomfortable for a week." We spent the next few days coordinating. I continued playing the devoted wife at home, planning the party, confirming details with David. He continued playing his part perfectly, thanking me for all my hard work, telling me how touched his mother would be. Meanwhile, Melissa and I were preparing for the confrontation of a lifetime. Margaret had all the legal documents ready: divorce papers, restraining orders if needed, documentation of the bigamy for criminal charges if we chose to press them, bank account freezes to prevent David from hiding money once he knew we were onto him. We invited everyone. I made a list of people from our life together. Friends, co-workers, neighbors. Melissa made a list from David's other life. His work contacts that were really friends from that side. People who'd been at the wedding. We sent invitations to all of them for Patricia's surprise birthday party at the church hall. The same church hall where David had married Melissa a week and a half earlier. Some people would be confused. Some would suspect something was off. But most would come if only out of curiosity. And that's all we needed, an audience. I also did something else, something I wasn't sure about until the moment I did it. I called David's actual work contacts, the real clients he consulted for. I told them I was his wife planning a celebration and wanted to invite the people he worked with most closely. Could they help me with names? They were confused. A couple of them asked if I meant the company party or something else. One person said, "I didn't know David was married. He's never mentioned a wife." That's when I knew David had been compartmentalizing even more than I'd realized. He'd kept his work life completely separate too, probably so his lies wouldn't cross-contaminate. He'd built walls between every aspect of his existence. I was about to tear down every single wall. The week passed in this strange duality. During the day, I played my role. Loving wife, excited party planner, supportive partner. I made dinner, asked about David's day, cuddled with him on the couch. At night, while he slept, I refined the plan, coordinated with Melissa, prepared for what was coming. It was easier than I expected, pretending. Maybe because I'd realized he'd been pretending our entire relationship. Or maybe because I was numb, detached, already grieving the death of the marriage even though the official end hadn't come yet. David suspected nothing. Why would he? In his mind, he'd pulled it off. He'd married Melissa, she was in the apartment waiting for him to figure out how to transition his lives, and I was still clueless. His plan was working perfectly. He had no idea that his two wives were working together to destroy him. The night before the party, David and I were in bed. He was scrolling on his phone, probably texting Melissa from his secret phone while lying next to me. The audacity of it didn't even hurt anymore. I was beyond hurt. I was in execution mode. "Big day tomorrow," I said softly. He looked over, smiled. "Yeah, Mom's going to be so surprised. You've really outdone yourself, Claire. She's lucky to have you as a daughter-in-law." I wondered if he felt any guilt at all. If there was any part of him that recognized the cruelty of what he was doing. Or if he'd convinced himself he deserved this, deserved to have everything he wanted without consequences. "I just hope she likes it," I said. "She will. She's going to love it. You're amazing, you know that." He kissed me and I let him. I even kissed him back, because it was the last time. After tomorrow, David would never touch me again. He'd never smile at me, never tell me he loved me, never pretend to be the man I'd married. After tomorrow, everyone would know exactly who David Cooper was, and his comfortable, compartmentalized life would cease to exist. I fell asleep that night with a strange sense of peace. Not happiness, exactly, but purpose. I knew what was coming, I'd prepared for it, and I was ready. David had no idea what was about to hit him, and honestly, that might have been my favorite part. The morning of the party, I woke up early and went for a run. Murphy came with me, like always, and we did our usual route through the neighborhood. Everything looked normal. The sun was rising, people were getting their newspapers, sprinklers were running on lawns. A perfect Saturday morning. Except today was the day I burned my entire life down, and somehow that felt right. When I got back, David was making breakfast. Pancakes, my favorite. He was in a good mood, humming to himself. I wondered if he was thinking about Melissa, about the apartment, about his other life, or if he'd gotten so good at compartmentalizing that he could genuinely be present in this moment, in this kitchen, with me. "Morning beautiful," he said, kissing my cheek. "Big day, you nervous?" "A little," I said honestly. "Don't be. Everything is going to be perfect. You've planned everything down to the last detail." "Yes," I said, "I have." We ate breakfast together, and it felt surreal. Like we were characters in a play, going through the motions of a scene. The loving couple on the morning of a family celebration. Except the script was about to change in a way only I knew about. After breakfast, I showered and got ready. I chose my outfit carefully. A navy blue dress, elegant but not too formal. I wanted to look put together, strong. I did my makeup, styled my hair. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone I barely recognized. Same face, same features, but different eyes. Harder, more determined. David came up behind me, wrapped his arms around my waist, looked at our reflection. "We make a good team, don't we?" I met his eyes in the mirror. The best. He smiled, completely unaware. "I love you, Claire." "I know," I said. Not "I love you too," just "I know." He didn't notice. We drove to the church separately. I told him I needed to go early to set up, and he should come later so he could bring his mother under the pretense of some other excuse. He agreed, said he'd text me when they were close. When I pulled into the church parking lot, the same parking lot where I'd watched his wedding 11 days ago, I felt a surge of something powerful. Not quite rage, not quite satisfaction. Something in between. Justice, maybe. Melissa was already there, parked in the back. We'd coordinated to arrive separately, not be seen together until the right moment. She texted me, "I'm here, I'm terrified." I texted back, "Me too, but we're doing this." He deserves this. Yes, he does. I went into the hall and started setting up. I'd actually planned a real party because I needed it to look legitimate. Decorations in blue and gold, tables with centerpieces, a cake from a local bakery with "Happy Birthday, Patricia" written in frosting, food tables, drinks, a playlist of music. It looked beautiful, like a genuine celebration. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd put all this effort into a party for a woman who'd betrayed me almost as thoroughly as her son had. People started arriving around 1. Neighbors from our street, looking confused when they saw guests they didn't recognize. Friends from my work, there to support me. People from David's other life, looking around with obvious discomfort because they recognized the church, knew this was where the wedding had been. And then some people who clearly knew something was very wrong. Margaret, the neighbor who'd been at David's wedding to Melissa. She walked in, saw me, and her face went white. She turned around like she was going to leave, but I smiled at her. "Margaret, so glad you could make it. Please stay. We're going to have quite a celebration." She knew, I could see it in her eyes. She knew exactly what was about to happen, and she was trapped. Good. By 1:30, the hall was full. Maybe 60 people from all different corners of David's fragmented life. Some were chatting comfortably. Others looked confused or uncomfortable. A few were clearly putting pieces together and looking nervous. Patricia hadn't arrived yet. Neither had David. At 1:45, my phone buzzed. "David. On our way. Mom is so excited. She thinks we're just meeting someone for lunch. This is going to be great." I showed the text to Melissa, who was standing near me in the corner. She'd been avoiding people, staying out of sight, but now it was almost time. "You ready?" I asked her. She took a deep breath. "Let's do this." At exactly 1:50, I saw David's car pull into the parking lot. I watched through the window as he helped his mother out, as Amanda emerged from the back seat. They were all dressed nicely, ready for what they thought was a nice lunch. They had no idea they were walking into an ambush. I positioned myself at the front of the room. Melissa stood next to me, visible to anyone who looked our way. The room quieted as people sensed something was about to happen. The door opened. Patricia walked in first, and immediately people started calling out surprise. But the chorus was confused, half-hearted, because many people in this room had no idea who she was or why they were here. Patricia looked around, bewildered. Then she saw me, smiled, started to walk over. Then she saw Melissa standing next to me and she stopped dead. The color drained from her face. David walked in behind her, Amanda at his side. He was smiling, ready for his mother's surprised reaction. Then he looked up, saw the room full of people from both of his lives, saw Melissa and me standing together at the front. And he understood. I watched the realization hit him like a physical blow. His smile disappeared. His face went from confused to shocked to terrified in the span of 3 seconds. Amanda grabbed his arm, hissed something I couldn't hear. Patricia looked like she might faint. The room had gone completely silent. Everyone was staring at us, at them, trying to understand what was happening. I stepped forward and my voice was calm, clear, strong. "Thank you all for coming today. I know many of you are confused about why you're here. Some of you are probably very uncomfortable right now. But I promise, everything is about to make sense." David started to speak. "Claire, what are you?" "Please don't interrupt," I said, cutting him off. "You've had years to talk, now it's my turn." I looked around the room, making eye contact with as many people as I could. "My name is Claire Cooper. I've been married to David for 7 years. We have a home together, a life together. Or at least, I thought we did. 11 days ago, I discovered that my husband has been living a double life, and I discovered it in the worst way possible." I pulled out my phone, connected it to the projector I'd set up. I was driving to this church to prepare for what I thought was a surprise party for my mother-in-law. My tire blew out. I walked to the parking lot and I saw this. The photos appeared on the screen. David in his tuxedo, Melissa in her wedding dress. The two of them on the church steps, holding hands, surrounded by celebrating guests. Patricia crying happy tears, Amanda as maid of honor. Gasps went through the room. People started murmuring, looking from the screen to David to me to Melissa. While married to me, I continued, David married another woman, right here in this church, with his family's full knowledge and participation. Patricia made a choking sound. Amanda was staring at the floor. Melissa, I gestured to the woman next to me, had no idea I existed. David told her he was single. His family backed up that story. Together, they created an entire fictional narrative so he could have 2 wives, 2 lives, 2 families. David found his voice. Claire, please, this isn't. Let me explain. Explain what, David? How you committed bigamy, how you used marital funds to support your affair, how you've been lying to both of us for 2 years. Please, I'd love to hear the explanation. He looked around the room, desperate. Some people looked sympathetic to him, others looked disgusted, most just looked shocked. Melissa stepped forward, her voice shaking but determined. I gave up my job for you, my apartment, my independence, because you said we were building a future. You said you loved me. You married me. Was any of it real? Melissa, I do love you. I can explain everything if you just... No, she said firmly. You can't. There's no explanation that makes this okay. I advanced the photos on the screen. Bank statements showing the money he'd funneled to the apartment. Emails between him and Melissa making plans. Texts between him and his family coordinating the wedding. His notes about divorcing me in a way that would minimize my settlement. Every lie, every betrayal displayed for everyone to see. I'm filing for divorce, I announced. My lawyer has already prepared all the paperwork. David will be receiving it Monday morning, and I'm considering pressing criminal charges for bigamy, fraud, and theft of marital assets. David's face was ashen. You can't. Claire, please, we can talk about this, in private. This doesn't have to be. Public, I finished. You're right, it didn't have to be, but you made it public when you had a wedding with 60 guests, when you involved your family, your friends, people from our neighborhood in your lies. So yes, this is going to be very public. I turned to Patricia, who was crying silently. And you welcomed me into your family, called me your daughter, all while helping your son plan a wedding to another woman. How could you? She couldn't even look at me, just stood there, tears streaming down her face, shaking her head. Amanda stepped forward, defensive. You don't understand, it's complicated. David was. Stop, I said sharply. There's nothing complicated about this. He's a liar and a cheat, and you helped him. You all did, and now everyone knows it. I looked around the room one more time. I invited all of you here today because you all played a role in this story. Some of you were lied to, like Melissa and me. Some of you were complicit, like his family. And some of you knew and said nothing, which makes you guilty too. I wanted you all here together so you could see the full scope of what David has done, so you could see the consequences of lying and betrayal and cruelty. The room was utterly silent. David was standing in the middle of it all, his perfect double life exposed and demolished. His mother was sobbing. His sister looked furious and embarrassed. Melissa was crying quietly next to me, but she was standing tall. And I felt free. For the first time in 11 days, since that moment in the parking lot, I felt like I could breathe. There's cake, I said, gesturing to the table. And food. You're all welcome to stay if you want, or you can leave. But before you go, remember this, lies always come out. Betrayal always has consequences, and the people you hurt will not always stay silent. I walked out of the hall, Melissa right behind me. We left David standing there, surrounded by the wreckage of his lies, facing all the people he'd betrayed. And we didn't look back. Melissa and I sat in my car in the parking lot, neither of us speaking for a long moment. We could see people starting to leave the hall through the windows. Some were rushing out, probably embarrassed or uncomfortable. Others were lingering, no doubt discussing what they'd just witnessed. My hands were shaking. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation was starting to fade, leaving behind exhaustion and a strange emptiness. I'd done it. I'd exposed him. But instead of feeling triumphant, I just felt tired. That was insane, Melissa finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't believe we actually did that. Did you see his face? I asked. Yeah, she let out a shaky laugh. He looked like his world was ending. Good, that's exactly how I felt 11 days ago. We watched as David emerged from the hall, his mother leaning on him, Amanda trailing behind looking furious. Patricia was still crying. David's face was unreadable from this distance, but his body language said everything. Shoulders slumped, head down, defeated. He helped his mother into the car, and I saw him look around the parking lot. Looking for me, probably, or maybe looking for an escape route from the disaster his life had just become. Amanda said something sharp to him, jabbing her finger in his direction. Even from here, I could tell she was angry. Whether she was angry at him for getting caught or angry at me for exposing him, I didn't know. Didn't care. They drove away and more people filed out. Some looked shell-shocked. Others were clearly gossiping, gesturing animatedly as they talked. Margaret, our neighbor, practically ran to her car, head down, avoiding eye contact with anyone. My phone started buzzing, text after text coming in. I glanced at the screen. Some were from people who'd been at the party, reaching out with support or questions. Others were from friends who'd already heard through the grapevine, because news like this spreads fast. One message stood out. From my friend Jennifer, who'd been at the party. Claire, that was the bravest thing I've ever seen. I'm here if you need anything at all. Melissa's phone was buzzing too. She looked at it and her face crumpled. My mom, someone must have told her. She's asking if it's true that my marriage isn't legal. What are you going to tell her? The truth, she said, wiping her eyes. I'm done with lies, even the ones that might make me look stupid. We sat there a while longer, watching the parking lot empty. Finally, Melissa turned to me. What happens now, legally, I mean, for both of us? For me, divorce proceedings start Monday. My lawyer says it should be pretty straightforward given all the evidence. He can't fight the bigamy charge, can't fight the hidden assets. I'll get the house, most of the money, everything. And for me, your marriage to him isn't legal, so there's nothing to dissolve. But you could sue him. Fraud, emotional distress, financial damages for what you gave up because of his lies. My lawyer has a colleague who specializes in cases like this. I can give you her number. Melissa nodded slowly. I want him to pay, not just money. I want him to face real consequences. We could press criminal charges, I said. Bigamy is a felony in this state. He could go to prison. Would you do it, press charges? I thought about it. Part of me wanted to see David in handcuffs, wanted him to face the full weight of what he'd done. But another part of me just wanted to be done with him, wanted to move forward with my life instead of being tied to him through a criminal trial. I don't know yet, I admitted. I'm going to talk to my lawyer about all the options, but even if we don't press charges, his life is destroyed. Everyone knows what he did. His reputation is ruined. He'll lose his clients when they find out. His family relationships are shattered. His money is going to me. He's going to be left with nothing. Except Melissa, she said with a bitter laugh. Oh wait, I'm leaving him too. Where will you go? Back to my mom's for a while. I need to figure out my next steps. Find a new job since I quit the old one. Start over, I guess. She looked at me. What about you? The house is mine, so I'll stay there. At least for now. Maybe eventually I'll sell it, move somewhere without all the memories. But for now, I need stability, familiar walls. Will you be okay, living there alone? I have Murphy, I said, smiling slightly. And honestly, I've been alone for years. I just didn't know it. At least now I won't be waiting for someone who's never really coming home. We exchanged phone numbers, promised to stay in touch. It was strange, this bond we'd formed. We'd both loved the same man, been betrayed by the same man, and somehow that shared trauma had created an understanding between us that felt genuine. Thank you, Melissa said as she got out of the car, for telling me the truth, for including me in today. You could have just divorced him quietly and let me keep living the lie. You deserve to know, I said. We both deserved better than what he gave us. She nodded, tears in her eyes again. I hope you find it, better, I mean, someone who actually deserves you. You too. I watched her walk to her car, this young woman whose life I'd just blown up. but it needed to be blown up. Better to build on truth than live in a beautiful lie. When she drove away, I sat alone in the parking lot of St. Catherine's Church, the place where this had all started. Or not started, exactly, but where the truth had been revealed. I thought about going inside, maybe saying a prayer or finding some kind of spiritual closure. But I didn't feel connected to God right now. Didn't feel connected to much of anything. My phone rang. David. I stared at the screen, watching it ring. Part of me wanted to answer, wanted to hear what he could possibly say, what excuse or explanation or plea he'd come up with. But I didn't answer. I just watched until it stopped ringing, until the voicemail notification appeared. I didn't listen to it. I blocked his number instead. He tried calling from other numbers throughout the evening. I blocked those too. He sent emails that I didn't read, just forwarded directly to Margaret, my lawyer. He even showed up at the house around 8 that night, banging on the door, begging me to let him in so we could talk. I'd changed the locks that afternoon. While he'd been dealing with the fallout at the church, I'd had a locksmith come and rekey everything. His keys no longer worked. His access to our home, to our life, was gone. "Claire, please," he shouted through the door. "Just let me explain. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. I love you." I stood on the other side of the door with Murphy beside me, saying nothing, just waiting for him to give up. "I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but it's over now. I told Melissa it's over. I choose you, Claire. I choose our marriage." The audacity of it. Like he was doing me some kind of favor. Like I should be grateful he was choosing me after I'd caught him marrying someone else. "Please don't do this," his voice cracked. "Don't throw away 7 years. We can get past this. We can go to counseling. I'll do anything, anything." Still, I said nothing. "Fine." His tone shifted to anger. "You want to ruin me. You want to destroy my life. See how that works out for you. You need me, Claire. Who's going to take care of you? Who's going to want you after this? You're making a huge mistake." And there it was. The real David. Not the loving husband or the apologetic cheater, but the manipulator. The man who'd been pulling strings and telling lies for years. This was who he really was. I heard him kick the door, heard him swear, and then finally heard him walk away. His car started, drove off. I looked out the window and watched his taillights disappear down the street. Then I locked the door, set the alarm, and went upstairs with Murphy. I took a long shower, letting the hot water wash away the stress and adrenaline of the day. When I got out, I looked at myself in the mirror. Same person as this morning, but somehow different. Stronger, maybe, or just more honest. I slept better that night than I had in almost 2 weeks. No lying husband next to me. No pretending. Just me, Murphy, and the truth. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, difficult conversations, and revelations that kept coming. Margaret worked quickly, filing the divorce papers first thing Monday morning. David was served at the apartment where he'd been staying since Melissa had kicked him out. Yes, she'd kicked him out. He'd gone there after the confrontation, probably expecting her to comfort him, to take his side. Instead, she'd thrown his belongings into the hallway and told him to never contact her again. He'd been staying in cheap motels ever since, according to the process server. His bank accounts had been frozen pending the divorce settlement. His credit cards, most of which were tied to our joint accounts, had been canceled. He had access to nothing. The legal proceedings revealed even more disturbing details. David hadn't just been living a double life with Melissa and me. There were other women. Not relationships exactly, but affairs. Women he'd met on his business trips, who he'd romanced briefly before moving on. My lawyer found hotel records, dating app profiles under fake names, emails that made me sick to read. David wasn't just a man who'd made a mistake. He was a serial cheater, a pathological liar, someone who'd been deceiving people for years. Melissa and I were just the two he'd gotten most serious with. We were the ones he'd decided to keep simultaneously. When I learned this, I called Melissa. She deserved to know. "There were others?" she asked, her voice hollow. "Yes, nothing as serious as what he had with us, but yes, many others." She was quiet for a long moment. "I feel so stupid." "You're not stupid. Neither of us are. He's a professional liar. This is what he does. We just happened to be his targets. I told my family everything, she said. They're furious. My dad wanted to go beat him up. My mom keeps crying and saying she should have seen the signs, but there were no signs. That's the thing. He was perfect. Too perfect. I know. My lawyer says I have a strong case for a civil suit. Fraud, breach of promise, intentional infliction of emotional distress. She thinks I could get a significant settlement. You should do it, I said. Take him for everything. Your lawyer said the same thing. Said if we both go after him, he'll be financially destroyed. Good. We'd become partners in this. Melissa and I united in our goal to make sure David faced every possible consequence. It wasn't about revenge anymore, not really. It was about justice. It was about making sure he couldn't do this to anyone else. The criminal charges came next. After consulting with Margaret and the district attorney, both Melissa and I decided to press charges. Bigamy, fraud, theft. The DA was eager to prosecute, said it was one of the clearest cases she'd seen. David was arrested 3 weeks after the confrontation at the church. I wasn't there, but I heard about it from Margaret. He'd been staying at a motel on the edge of town, still trying to contact me and Melissa, still sending messages through intermediaries begging us to drop the charges. When the police showed up, he apparently broke down. Cried, begged, said he was a good person who'd made mistakes. They arrested him anyway. He spent the night in jail before his sister bylaid him out. Amanda had been trying to reach me too. Emails, messages through mutual acquaintances, even a letter she'd mailed to the house. All of them said essentially the same thing. I'd overreacted. David had made mistakes, but he loved me. Family should forgive. I was being cruel and vindictive. I never responded. There was nothing to say to someone who thought what David had done was just a mistake. Patricia, his mother, sent a single text message. I'm sorry. That was it. 2 words after 2 years of participating in her son's betrayal. I didn't respond to her either. The divorce moved forward quickly. David tried to fight it at first, hired a lawyer who filed motions claiming I was taking advantage of a difficult situation. But the evidence was overwhelming. Every judge who looked at the case sided with me. David had committed bigamy, hidden assets, and violated our marriage in every way possible. He had no legal leg to stand on. The settlement gave me everything. The house, the retirement accounts, 70% of his business assets. He was ordered to pay my legal fees and provide alimony for 5 years. When it was all calculated, David was left with almost nothing. His business collapsed too. Once word got out about what he'd done, his clients started dropping him. No one wanted to work with someone who'd been exposed as a fraud and a liar. His reputation in the industry was destroyed. He tried to rebrand, start over, but the story had spread too far. Melissa's civil suit was settled out of court. David didn't have much money left after my divorce settlement, but what he did have, he gave to her. Another significant chunk that left him essentially bankrupt. The criminal trial took longer. David pleaded not guilty at first, claimed he'd had a mental breakdown, that he wasn't in his right mind. But the evidence showed years of calculated deception. This wasn't a breakdown. This was a pattern. Eventually, his lawyer convinced him to take a plea deal. He pled guilty to bigamy and fraud charges. The judge sentenced him to 18 months in prison and 3 years probation. He was also ordered to attend therapy and perform community service. I was in the courtroom when the sentence was handed down. David looked small, defeated, nothing like the confident man I'd married. He glanced at me once, and I saw him mouth the words, "I'm sorry." I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, no residual love or pain. Just nothing. He was a stranger who'd caused me harm, and now he was facing consequences. That was all. Melissa was there too. She sat next to me, and we held hands as the judge spoke about the severity of betrayal, about the violation of trust, about the need for accountability. When it was over, we walked out of the courthouse together into the bright afternoon sun. "Is it wrong that I don't feel better?" Melissa asked. "He's going to prison, he lost everything, but I don't feel like I won." "Because it's not about winning," I said. It's about closing a chapter. This part of our lives is over, and now we get to figure out what comes next. What does come next for you? I thought about it. I'd been so focused on the divorce, the legal battles, the confrontation, that I hadn't really considered what my life would look like after. I don't know, I admitted. But I get to decide. That's the difference. For the first time in years, maybe ever, I get to build a life based on what I actually want, not what someone else has planned for me. Melissa smiled. That sounds pretty good, actually. Yeah, I said, it does. We parted ways that day with promises to stay in touch. And we did. Melissa and I became genuine friends, bonded by shared trauma but connected by mutual respect. We'd check in with each other, have coffee sometimes, support each other through the healing process. She moved back to her hometown, reconnected with old friends, started over in a place where people didn't know her story. Last I heard, she'd met someone new, someone honest and kind. I was happy for her. As for me, I threw myself into my work. Being a guidance counselor took on new meaning after everything I'd been through. I understood betrayal now, understood how it felt when your foundation crumbled. I could connect with students going through divorces in their families, dealing with lies and broken trust. I could help them in ways I never could have before. I also started speaking publicly about financial abuse and infidelity. A local women's organization asked me to share my story at an event, and I agreed. Talking about what happened was terrifying at first, but also liberating. Other women would come up to me afterward, sharing their own stories, thanking me for being brave enough to speak out. I realized that while David had tried to destroy me, he'd actually made me stronger, more resilient, more aware. I'd never be that trusting, naive person again. But maybe that wasn't a bad thing. Maybe there was strength in being a little guarded, a little more careful about who you gave your heart to. The house eventually sold. I couldn't live there anymore, surrounded by memories both real and fake. I bought a small condo downtown, closer to work, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a balcony where Murphy could sit in the sun. It was mine, just mine, and that felt right. I dated occasionally, but nothing serious. I wasn't ready for serious. Maybe I wouldn't be for a long time, and that was okay. I was learning to be comfortable alone, to find joy in my own company. I traveled, took up painting, spent time with friends, built a life that was full and meaningful without needing someone else to validate it. About a year after the divorce was finalized, I got a letter from David, written from prison. Margaret forwarded it to me with a note saying I didn't have to read it if I didn't want to, but I was curious. After everything, I wanted to know what he could possibly have to say. The letter was long, pages and pages of small handwriting. It started with apologies. He was sorry for everything he'd done, for the pain he'd caused, for the lies and betrayal. He said prison had given him time to reflect, to understand how sick his behavior had been. He was in therapy, working through issues from his childhood, trying to understand why he'd sabotaged everything good in his life. He talked about his father leaving, about growing up feeling like he was never enough, about developing this need to be everything to everyone, to have backup plans and escape routes, about how that had morphed into keeping multiple lives, multiple identities, so he'd never be abandoned or trapped. It was honest, I'll give him that, more honest than he'd ever been with me when we were married, but it also felt like too little, too late. Understanding why someone hurt you doesn't erase the hurt. The letter ended with a request. He wasn't asking me to forgive him, he said. He didn't deserve that. But he hoped that someday I'd be able to remember the good times without pain, that I'd be able to move forward and find happiness. And he wanted me to know that despite everything, despite all his lies, he had loved me. Maybe not the way I deserved, maybe not in any healthy way, but in his broken, damaged way, he had loved me. I read the letter 3 times. Then I put it in a drawer and never looked at it again. Did I believe him? That he'd loved me? Maybe, in his own twisted way. But it didn't matter. Love without honesty is worthless. Love without respect is abuse. Whatever David had felt for me, it wasn't the kind of love that mattered. I didn't write back. There was nothing to say. He'd said his piece, and now we were both moving on. In different directions, different lives, different futures. 2 years after that day in the church parking lot, I found myself back at St. Catherine's. Not for anything related to David or the memories, but because they were hosting a community event for the school district and I was there representing my school. I stood in the parking lot, looking at the spot where I'd hidden behind the van, where I'd watched my world fall apart. It felt like a lifetime ago, like it had happened to someone else. Father Michael saw me and came over. We'd never spoken about what had happened, about his role in marrying David to Melissa while David was married to me. But he looked uncomfortable, like he'd been waiting for this conversation. "Claire," he said, "I owe you an apology." "Yes," I said simply, "you do." I should have done more due diligence. I should have verified David's claims about being single. I should have known something was wrong. I failed you, and I failed the sanctity of marriage. I'm deeply sorry. I looked at this man, this priest who'd unknowingly participated in one of the worst betrayals of my life. He looked older, more tired. Maybe this had weighed on him too. "Did you know," I asked, "about me?" "No," he said firmly. "I swear to you I didn't know. If I had, I never would have performed that ceremony. When I found out, when the truth came out, I was horrified. I've been doing this for 30 years, and I've never been deceived like that." I believed him. I could see the genuine remorse in his eyes. "David was very convincing," I said. "He fooled everyone. You weren't the only one." "Still, I should have been more careful. I've changed my procedures since then. Background checks, waiting periods, more thorough counseling. What happened with you and Melissa will never happen again in my church." "Good," I said. "That's something at least." We stood there in awkward silence for a moment. Then he said, "For what it's worth, I think you're incredibly brave. What you did, exposing the truth like that, it took courage. A lot of people would have just suffered in silence." "Suffering in silence doesn't help anyone," I said. "It just protects the people who do harm." He nodded. "I've been praying for you, for healing and peace and happiness." "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. I wasn't angry at him anymore. He'd been a tool in David's deception, but he hadn't been a willing participant. There was a difference. The event started, and I went inside into the hall where I'd staged the confrontation. It had been redecorated since then, different colors, different layout. But I could still picture everyone standing there, the shock on David's face, the moment the truth exploded into the open. I'd wondered sometimes if I'd done the right thing, if the public confrontation had been too much, too dramatic, if I should have handled it quietly, privately, without the spectacle. But then I'd remember how many people had participated in the lie, how they'd all been comfortable keeping the secret as long as it didn't affect them. They'd needed to be uncomfortable. They'd needed to face what they'd been part of. And I'd needed to take back my power, to control the narrative instead of being the victim who found out last. So no, I didn't regret it. I'd do it again exactly the same way. After the event, I drove home to my condo. Murphy greeted me at the door, tail wagging, pure and uncomplicated in his love. I made dinner, watched the sunset from my balcony, called my mom just to talk. My life was quiet now, peaceful, nothing like the drama and chaos of 2 years ago, and I loved it. I loved the simplicity, the honesty, the fact that I knew exactly who I was and what I wanted. I'd been broken by what David did, shattered, really, but I'd put myself back together, and in the process, I'd become someone stronger, someone who knew her worth, someone who would never again accept less than she deserved. Did I still have scars? Of course. Trust issues, fears about being deceived again, moments where I questioned everything and everyone. But I was working through them. In therapy with friends on my own. Healing wasn't linear and it wasn't quick, but it was happening. Sometimes, late at night, I'd think about David. Wonder where he was, what he was doing. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd been released from prison after serving his sentence. That he was living in another state, working some regular job, keeping his head down. Patricia had reached out once more, about 6 months after everything. A longer message this time, explaining how she'd gotten caught up in David's lies, how she'd convinced herself that what he was doing was somehow okay because she just wanted him to be happy. She said she was ashamed, that she'd failed as a mother and as a person. She asked if there was any way I could forgive her. I'd written back, but I'd kept it brief. I told her I understood how manipulative David could be, how he made people believe his version of reality. But I also told her that understanding wasn't the same as excusing. She'd made choices, and those choices had hurt me. I didn't hate her, but I didn't want a relationship with her either. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. She'd responded with acceptance and another apology. I never heard from her again. Amanda never apologized, never even acknowledged what she'd done. As far as I knew, she still blamed me for ruining her brother's life. Some people could never admit fault, could never see past their own perspective. I'd learned to be okay with that. I didn't need her acknowledgement to know I'd done the right thing. Melissa and I still talked regularly. She was engaged now to a man who knew her whole story and loved her anyway. She was happy, genuinely happy, in a way she'd never been with David. We'd met for coffee a few weeks ago, and she'd told me she was grateful for everything that had happened. Grateful? I'd asked, surprised. I know it sounds crazy, she'd said. But if you hadn't found out, if you hadn't told me, I'd still be living that lie. I'd have married him thinking he was someone he wasn't. The truth would have come out eventually, and it would have been worse. You saved me from years of deception. I guess we saved each other, I'd said. We really did. Looking back now, I could see the journey clearly. From that moment in the parking lot where my life fell apart, through the pain and anger and betrayal, through the planning and confrontation and legal battles, to this place of peace and clarity. It had been the hardest thing I'd ever been through, but it had also been the most transformative. David had tried to destroy me, but instead, he'd freed me from a false life, from lies, from a love that was never real. He'd inadvertently given me the chance to rebuild myself into someone authentic and strong. And in the end, I'd gotten something he never would. I'd gotten peace. Real, genuine peace that came from living honestly, from facing hard truths, from choosing integrity over comfort. So what's the moral of this story? What's the lesson I learned that I can pass on to you, sitting there watching or listening to this? It's this: the truth will set you free, but first it will break your heart. When I saw David in that parking lot with another woman in a wedding dress, my world shattered. Everything I believed about my life, my marriage, my husband turned out to be a carefully constructed lie. And in that moment, I had a choice. I could pretend I hadn't seen it. I could go home and live in denial. I could confront him privately and maybe accept whatever excuse he came up with because it would be easier than facing the truth. Or I could choose to see clearly, to acknowledge the reality, no matter how painful, to face the truth head-on and deal with the consequences. I chose truth, and it destroyed me, but then it rebuilt me into someone better. Here's what I want you to understand. Betrayal like this isn't your fault. When someone you love lies to you, manipulates you, lives a double life, that's on them, not you. You didn't cause it by being too trusting or too naive or too anything. They made a choice to deceive. They're responsible for that choice and its consequences. But you are responsible for what you do next. Once you know the truth, you can't unknow it. You can only decide how you're going to respond. Some people will tell you to be quiet, to handle things privately, to protect the reputation of the person who hurt you or their family or yourself. They'll say making it public is petty, vindictive, dramatic. Don't listen to them. Those are the same people who benefit from silence, who want you to carry the shame that belongs to your betrayer, who prefer comfortable lies to uncomfortable truths. I made it public because the lie had been public. David didn't just betray me in private. He'd involved dozens of people in his deception. His family, his friends, Melissa's friends and family. All of those people were complicit, knowingly or not. They deserved to know the truth. And I deserved to control my own narrative instead of being the pathetic wife who got cheated on and said nothing. Was it dramatic? Yes. Was it uncomfortable for everyone involved? Absolutely. Do I regret it? Not even a little bit. Because that confrontation, that public exposure, it gave me my power back. For weeks I'd been the victim, the one who didn't know, the fool. But in that church hall, standing in front of everyone, I became the truth teller, the strong one, the one who refused to be silenced or shamed. And that made all the difference in my healing. Another lesson: you are stronger than you think. When I first found out about David's betrayal, I thought it would destroy me. I couldn't imagine surviving it, couldn't see how I'd ever feel okay again. But humans are incredibly resilient. We can endure so much more than we think we can. And often, we discover our greatest strength in our darkest moments. I didn't know I could be strategic and calculating. I'd always been the nice girl, the peacemaker, the one who avoided conflict. But when I needed to be, I became a warrior. I planned, I gathered evidence, I executed a confrontation that exposed years of lies in one devastating moment. That wasn't who I thought I was, but it turned out it was exactly who I could be when necessary. You have that strength too. Maybe you haven't needed it yet. Maybe you've never been tested in that way. But if you ever are, if someone ever betrays you so completely that you think you can't go on, remember, you can. You're stronger than you know. And you'll surprise yourself with what you're capable of when you have to be. Also, find your allies. I never would have made it through without Margaret, my lawyer. Without Melissa, who became an unexpected friend and partner. Without the friends and family who supported me when things got hard. You can't do it alone. Don't try to lean on people. Let them help you. Accept support. And recognize that healing isn't linear. 2 years later, I still have hard days. I still sometimes question my judgment. I still have moments where I wonder if I'll ever fully trust again. But those moments are fewer and farther between now. And in between them, there's joy. There's peace. There's a life I've built that's authentic and mine. Betrayal doesn't have to define you. It's something that happened to you, not something you are. You're not the person who got cheated on or lied to or betrayed. You're the person who survived it, who faced it, who chose truth over comfort and integrity over easy lies. That's who I am now, not David's ex-wife, not the woman who got betrayed, but the woman who stood up for herself, who demanded honesty, who refused to settle for less than she deserved. And if you're going through something like this right now, if you've just discovered a betrayal or you're in the middle of dealing with one, I want you to know you're going to be okay. Not today, maybe not for a while, but eventually. You're going to rebuild. You're going to find yourself again, or maybe find a version of yourself you never knew existed. The pain is temporary. The strength you gain is permanent. One more thing I want to say, especially to those who might be in the position David's family was in. If you know someone is being betrayed and you say nothing, you're complicit. I don't care if it's your son or your brother or your best friend doing the betraying. You have a moral obligation to either speak up or refuse to participate. Patricia and Amanda could have told me, could have warned me, could have refused to attend David's wedding to Melissa. They chose not to. They chose to protect David and his lies instead of doing the right thing. And that choice cost them their relationship with me and their own integrity. If you ever find yourself in that position, ask yourself, what kind of person do I want to be? Someone who enables harmful behavior because it's family, or someone who stands up for what's right, even when it's hard? Choose right. Always choose right. And finally, to anyone out there who might be living a double life, who might be deceiving people who love you, stop. Stop right now. The truth always comes out. Always. And when it does, the fallout will be so much worse than if you'd just been honest from the beginning. David thought he was clever, thought he could manage 2 lives indefinitely. But his house of cards collapsed, as they always do, and he lost everything. His wife, his girlfriend, his family relationships, his money, his freedom, his reputation. Everything. Was it worth it? I doubt it. No amount of excitement or ego boost or whatever he was getting from his double life was worth the destruction it caused. Not just to me and Melissa, but to himself. So if you're living a lie, come clean. It will be painful. People will be hurt. But it will be nothing compared to the pain of discovery. Give the people you've deceived the dignity of truth. It's the least you can do. As for me, I'm doing more than okay. I'm actually happy. Genuinely, authentically happy in a way I never was with David, because this happiness isn't based on a lie. It's not contingent on someone else's choices or feelings. It's mine, built on truth and self-knowledge and the strength I discovered when I needed it most. I wake up every morning in my condo with Murphy beside me, and I know exactly who I am, what I want, what I deserve. There's power in that clarity. There's peace in that truth. Would I go back and change things if I could? Would I choose not to marry David, avoid the whole painful experience? I've asked myself that question many times, and honestly, I don't know. The betrayal was devastating. The pain was real, but so was the growth. So was the strength I found. So was the authentic life I've built on the other side. Maybe some lessons can only be learned through pain. Maybe some strength can only be forged in fire. I don't know if I believe everything happens for a reason, but I do believe we can find meaning in everything that happens. We can choose to let our pain define us or refine us. I chose refinement. I chose growth. I chose to become someone who knows her worth and won't settle for less. And that, more than any revenge, more than any legal victory, more than anything else, is the real triumph of this story. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being here with me through this journey. I hope my story helps someone out there who's going through something similar. I hope it gives you courage to face hard truths. I hope it reminds you that you're stronger than you know. And I hope it makes you think twice before you lie to someone who loves you, because the truth always, always comes out. And when it does, there's no going back. My name is Claire Cooper. This was my story. And I'm not a victim. I'm a survivor. I'm a warrior. I'm a woman who looked betrayal in the face and said, "You will not destroy me." And it didn't. If you made it this far, thank you. Drop a comment and let me know what you think. Tell me your story if you want to. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it. And remember, the truth will set you free. It might break your heart first, but it will set you free. Stay strong, stay honest, and never ever settle for less than you deserve. This is Claire, signing off.